Sustainable You is a casual, interactive, yet informative series detailing and cataloging the sustainability experience. Moreover, this is a short podcast docuseries detailing the thoughts and experiences of passionate advocates towards all things eco-friendly. Our journey is to know how and why understanding sustainable development towards the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet can contribute for a more mindful, holistic, and inclusive world. Specifically, this podcast showcases what makes you a changemaker, innovator, and transformer as you tackle sustainability challenges for current and future generations to resolve the so-called wicked problems. So for today's episode, we opted to go find out more about the so-called green transition in the Canadian workforce by conversing with Geni Peters, the research lead for Eco Canada. If anything, this is quintessential for enabling a skilled workforce for the environmental sector to ensure a net zero future by 2050. Eco Canada is an environmental steward for the Canadian environmental sector. It does so by championing initiatives such as promoting sustainable economic growth and by supporting innovative labor solutions that will foster a new era of climate change advocacy across Canada. For example, through educational seminars, workshops, and professional environmental designations. For today's spiel, I had the chance to connect with the head of research development to learn more about Canada's trajectory in championing a more sustainable tomorrow.
Sure. My name is Geni Peters, and I am the Director of Research at Eco Canada. Eco Canada is a not-for-profit organization that supports the environmental workforce across Canada. We consider environmental workers, regardless of what industry, what occupation, what level of experience they have, and we provide them with support through training or accreditation. We have a certification program, and we do a lot of research as well to find out where there might be skills gaps. So that's where my organization comes in. I am an economist by training, and I come to Eco Canada after teaching at a number of institutions in the United States in the university setting, and then I came back to Canada to be with my family and to get a chance to try out a little bit of research. And so that's where I landed in the kind of the labor market information space.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction. And just on this next one, just to get to know you a little bit better, so I'm going to send you a list of adjectives, and you're just going to choose one that depicts your personal nature the best. And again, the purpose is not to typecast your personality as being type A or B or anything like that, but basically, what would be your persona in regards to your vocation or your calling and what you're doing right now at Eco Canada?
Okay. I'd say probably I am relaxed.
Okay. And why would you say that?
I say that because I've learned over the years that it's incredibly important to be adaptable and resilient, and that any obstacles or challenges that come your way are opportunities as well, and it just gives you a chance to grow and to explore new avenues. So I really don't get stressed out all that much. I just take things as they come and roll with the punches.
Okay, great. And just in regards to that, what makes you uncertain and what makes you curious?
I think the main thing that makes me uncertain is the fact that there is so much going on in environmental work and such a small amount of time that I have to explore all of that and to become well-versed in that. And so I'm often asked to begin projects, do research into areas that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And it's an opportunity to explore, but it also means that I don't necessarily have all of the information that I would like to have in order to make upfront decisions about how long the project's going to take, how many resources are going to be required, because I don't know what's involved. I think I've always been curious. I don't know that there's any one external factor that leads to me being curious. I think that it's in my life, I've gotten bored when I know too much about what I'm doing, and I always look for opportunities to explore. I cultivate friends who have got different perspectives, and I like to hear from them what they perceive to be issues of importance and what their philosophies are. So yeah, I think I'm always looking for an opportunity to learn more.
Okay, great. And just to get to know who you are, Geni, tell me more about your struggles, your aspirations, and contributions that led you to get involved in the environmental services sector and, I guess, climate change action in general.
Okay. Well, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, I have a background in economics. And while not everyone thinks of economics as a discipline that's related closely to environmental protection and sustainability, the truth is economics is a field of study where we try to find out the best way to allocate the scarce resources that we have here on Earth. Economic decision making is about costs and benefits, and we don't want to move forward on a new initiative or a new business or consume a new product if the costs outweigh the benefits, if we're using up more resources than we're getting as our outputs. So it's a natural evolution from my perspective. I think where my biggest challenge came in was that I didn't study a lot in the way of labor economics. My background was in energy and environmental economics with a little bit of regulation thrown in there as well. But when I came back up to Canada, the job opportunities were mostly available in the labor market space, the labor information space. So I had to kind of bone up on that when I joined, and I had to be able to convince the employers that I was going to work for that my background, despite not having a strong labor economics background, was going to provide me with the information that I needed in order to be able to work in that field. I think another challenge was moving from an academic setting when I was working in the US at the university level. It's a very different type of job than it is when you come to work for an organization with a more research flavor or even a more business flavor. In the academic setting, you're often working independently. You set your own hours, except for the courses that you're teaching. You get to make decisions about what to include in the courses and what not to include, how to design the curriculum. And so there's a lot of independence there. When I moved into a business setting, it was an evolution, moving into more teamwork and moving into a setting where I was working with people with different backgrounds and different skill sets, and learning to delegate and learning to leverage everybody's best efforts and not having to take everything on myself. So that was a bit of an evolution for me.
And what would you say are the most important personal satisfactions and dissatisfactions connected with the sustainability sector, especially when it comes to the green workforce and climate action, again, activism, maybe advocacy? Yeah, so I guess, what do you find the most satisfying? What do you find the most challenging?
Sure. So I think I find it very satisfying in the environmental space and in the sustainability space. It's very innovative. The work that is being done is problem solving. We know that we've got tailings coming out of mines or oil and gas installations, and we have to figure out the best way in order to be able to protect the environment from any of those tailing impacts. That requires research, it requires innovation, it requires creativity and risk taking. And I find that very exciting. The same thing is true in the climate change space. There's a lot of work being done to evolve the measurement of emissions, the reporting of emissions, the new ways to help reduce emissions going forward. It's a very exciting place to be in terms of an industry. It's evolving quickly. You got to keep on your toes in order to be able to work in this space. And it gives opportunities to individuals to really express their strengths, make that a real career where they get a lot of excitement and a lot of self-satisfaction out of that. I think in terms of challenges in this sustainability space, I think I find it a little bit challenging when individuals are not necessarily open to hearing other people's perspectives on the costs and benefits of various different initiatives that are being proposed. Is in many cases a lot of politics involved, and individuals are often quite wedded to their own perspective and don't want to consider the possibility that other points of view might be valid or might be actually beneficial in order to help resolve the climate change concerns. So I think, that's one area where I find it a little bit challenging is kind of navigating and moderating and facilitating discussions amongst people who are of very different backgrounds. They're not always open to listening to each other.
Yeah, interesting. And what motivates you to continue in this field or pursue this initiative? Because I know you just mentioned this resistance to change and maybe kind of dealing with this diverse palette of stakeholders and conflicting viewpoints. So is there like what's the motivational aspect that I guess keeps you in the field?
Well, I think it goes back to my curiosity and my overall desire to make decisions as efficient as possible, in the sense that if we know from, say, another country's experience that a particular policy is not necessarily going to be well received in our community, then that's going to require a number of potential rethinks. For example, we could look at maybe modifying the policy to make it more adaptable to the region that we're in. It could be a matter of engaging the stakeholders and listening to what their concerns are, and then helping to address those concerns through the policy development or through the initiative itself. What I like about the work that's going on in Canada today is that we are aware of all of the various implications of industrial production and resource development. We are aware that it has impacts on social, cultural, environmental aspects of Canada. And we do try to do the best we can in terms of capturing what those impacts are and making the best decisions we can. Again, the idea that it's a cost-benefit analysis, there are going to be costs to any industrial production, any economic growth that we encounter, as well as benefits. And so the challenge then becomes, can we come to maybe not a consensus, but can we come to a resolution where the stakeholders as a group in King are comfortable with the direction that we're moving and feel that they're being heard when it comes to what's being done. So I think part of the benefit of working at Eco Canada is that we get to hear from all of these various different stakeholders. We're a very independent organization. We work with environmental workers who their entire business is cleaning up after heavy industry. And so they, from their business perspective, would like to see heavy industry continue and move forward. And we also work with individuals who have a very different perspective on heavy industry and would like to see heavy industry, say, reduced in terms of the level of activity in Canada. So we hear all of these different perspectives and we get a sense of what's bringing people to the table. The challenge that we have to try to bring those people together is exciting. It requires a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation as well. And so I find that very exciting too.
Hey, no, it's really interesting. And just to get to know you a little bit more, I actually wanted to ask your definition of what sustainable development is. So what do you think from your perspective sustainability is, and how do you personally view it within environmentalism and climate action, especially within the green workforce?
Okay. I think probably the best way to capture my perspective is as a realist. I view the development of economies and countries as a form of trade-offs. And so when we look at the overall definition of sustainability, the idea is that we want to ensure that the economic growth, the living standards that we have in our country are sustainable over time, that we're not overusing or damaging the lovely environment that we live in Canada, and that we're able to offer that same living standard to our children and our grandchildren and generations down the line. So from my perspective, that's really what we're looking at when we're talking about sustainability, is being able to ensure that our current consumption and our current production is not detracting from the well-being of society going forward.
Okay, great. And would you say your personal viewpoint, similar to Eco Canada's perspective on the sector, the sustainability sector?
I know that Eco Canada has a mission to support environmental work, looking at it from the perspective of sustainable long-term economic growth. So to that extent, I think that I would probably say they're aligned. I don't want to speak on behalf of the organization specifically, but I can say that I feel comfortable working at Eco Canada. I think that many of my colleagues have similar perspectives on the issue of sustainability and the environmental workforce development. Basically, what we want to do is we want to make sure that Canada has the skills and the labor and the workers that we need in order to be able to meet our environmental objectives. Whatever those environmental objectives might end up being, we want to ensure that the workforce is adaptable, resilient, that they're creative, they're able to communicate with people from a variety of different types of backgrounds, and that they're coming up with new creative solutions moving forward.
Okay, great. And is there a particular SDG you best advocate for? And just on that, do you think that these metrics still hold merit?
Well, I think that all of the SDGs overall are well intended and provide a good overall long-term objective. I think, again, that the challenge really is that in order to achieve one SDG, there may be trade-offs when it comes to other SDGs. And so trying to achieve all of them at once may be beyond what we can achieve given our limited resources and our knowledge at this point in time. I think probably from my own personal perspective, and I'm not saying this on Eco Canada's behalf, but on my own personal perspective, I think the reduction of poverty is one of the sustainable development goals that I find to be the most important for us to try to achieve. Knowing how many people globally are living not just day to day, but not even managing day to day. They're living at very low income levels. And so I would like to see that as a priority in conjunction with the other sustainability and environmental goals that we have.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to hear your perspective, because I know when I was in grad school, we had learned, and I don't know if that's just the Swedish perspective, but they really bashed on the SDGs, and they were like, they're flawed because, they buy into, again, the Anthropocene, and they don't really advocate for things like, degrowth and, I guess, ecocentric or biocentrism, and it's not really inclusive of all flora and fauna. So it's definitely interesting to see the SDGs as like a guidepost, but like you said, not to take them too literally, because there are always trade-offs from an economist's perspective. Okay, great. And thanks for giving your perspective on all these things. Now we're going to get a bit more into the organization itself. So to learn more about Eco Canada and its origins. So how did Eco Canada begin? How do you find, I know you mentioned this a bit before, but how does it clearly advocate for climate change, action leadership, and perhaps even community engagement? And again, I want to get to know how you got involved in establishing and or joining Eco Canada Story as the leading environmental nonprofit in Canada, and of course it has the wide range of programming that it showcases. So yeah, you can talk a bit more about that.
Okay, great. Well, let's start at the beginning. Eco Canada was created in 1992. It was an organization that we refer to as a sector council, which was a type of organization developed to help with workforce support and workforce development in a particular industry or sector of the economy. In the early 1990s, the federal government in Canada provided funds to individuals from a variety of different industries. Our sector councils, or there were sector councils for tourism, for biotech, for the construction sector, for energy, for electricity, for oil and gas. And the environmental sector was one sector where there was an absence of research and activity going on in that space. So in 1992, Eco Canada was founded to help support the environmental workforce. The organization is a not-for-profit organization. A lot of the work that we do is funded by the federal government government in Canada, but it focuses not just on climate change. In fact, climate change is really a rather new aspect of the work that we do, or climate change mitigation and adaptation work. We've been actively involved in environmental protection through work done in air quality, water quality, waste management, site assessment and remediation, environmental health and safety, and then more broadly, natural resource management, energy efficiency, renewable energy, sustainable industry, sustainable agriculture, sustainable fisheries. So that really gives you a kind of a broader perspective of where EcoCanada started. The climate change activities that are happening right now are really kind of something that we're evolving into. They weren't the foundation of what we were supporting at our initiation when we started. That said, EcoCanada is currently working with federal government funding to help promote the use of energy efficiency building codes within Indigenous communities. We're helping businesses develop their emissions baselines so that they can move forward with potential emissions reductions initiatives. We are working on a variety of different types of student training activities. We just held this past weekend a net zero student boot camp, which was a virtual boot camp across Canada for post-secondary students interested in learning more about net zero and emissions reduction. And then we have a variety of different events that we hold that are, again, more about information and knowledge mobilization, trying to connect people who have experience in emissions reductions with those who don't and who want to know more. So we work in that space largely. We're also working with our certification program to potentially provide a new certification in greenhouse gas emissions reporting and verification. So that's something that we're hoping to launch in the next few months as well. In addition, we also provide some environmental consulting support for firms that are very small firms. Small organizations often don't have the same resources as big multinationals. They have very limited time and money available in order to devote to any climate change mitigation or adaptation that they may want to initiate. And so we, as a not-for-profit, help support those at a relatively low cost as well.
Okay, great. And what would you say is EcoCanada's core values and intent? Is there almost like a basic philosophy of the nonprofit organization? I know you had spoke a bit about it before, but is there something that you wanted to mention for that?
So our vision is to create the world's leading environmental workforce in Canada. And we do that by recognizing that environmental work is apparent and is part and parcel of all industry activities, whether we're talking about traditional natural resource development. In fact, one of the things that many people don't know is that the province of Alberta, while we're oil and gas centric, as I suppose some people would say, we have a very strong oil and gas industry. It's in part because we have a strong oil and gas industry that we have so many environmental professionals in Alberta. We've got people who have been working hard for decades to help to mitigate the environmental impacts of oil and gas extraction and refining, to ensure that the products that we're producing have a limited impact on the infrastructure, on the biodiversity in the area. And so we have there's actually a lot of innovation and a lot of research and a lot of leadership in the traditional energy sector. That knowledge is being transferred to other industries to help them become more, I guess, climate friendly moving forward. From EcoCanada's perspective, we maintain independence, political independence. We don't advocate for any particular policies or any particular governments. We are supporting the environmental workers wherever they are, and we don't worry too much about what the political climate is, except to account for that when it comes to where we need to put our resources. The movement towards greater climate activity, climate change activity in Canada over the last 5-10 years has told us that we need to devote more of our resources to ensuring that the workers that are needed for those activities are well trained and capable of doing that work, and that they're available. So that's where we put our efforts. We follow what the the environmental activities, where the environmental activities are going, and we work to make sure that the environmental workforce is there and prepared to do the job.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. That's really insightful. And just for our listeners out there, as you know, Eco-Canada is a steward for the Canadian environmental workforce, and as Geni has mentioned, aims to bolster Canada's environmental sector. It does so by championing initiatives such as promoting sustainable economic growth, prioritizing environmental best practices, and supporting innovative workforce solutions and protocols. Again, that will foster a new era, not just in climate change advocacy across Canada, but as I learned today, across a wide range of initiatives. So just on this next question, so what burgeoning problems do you foresee in the environmental services industry as Canada makes a transition towards net zero emissions by 2050, just from, I guess, a researcher's perspective?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back down to the fact that we've got trade-offs that we're facing. The desire to reduce emissions often comes with both costs and benefits. And part of the challenge in moving organizations towards, say, greater energy efficiency is ensuring that they understand that there are benefits as well as costs. And then often those benefits are actually going to outweigh the costs in the long term. That said, there are a lot of organizations. Canada's overall economy is largely small businesses. Small businesses as a whole don't have the same sorts of human resource money, the same sort of money to invest in capital, and often cases the time to devote to environmental initiatives. And so what they do is they kind of work towards environmental goals a little bit more slowly than some of the larger multinational organizations that we hear of in the news. And they often need greater support in the form of initial funds up front so that they can try new technology on a risk-free basis. They also need, in terms of support, knowledge support. I mean, a small businessman or a small businesswoman is an expert in their business. They're not an expert in climate change. They're not an expert in environmental protection. And so they rely on consultants largely in order to be able to get the information that they need. When those consultants are charging $300 an hour, that can be out of the range of a small business's operating revenues. And so that's another area where I think the environmental workforce and the knowledge of let me back up a bit. The types of resources that are going to be needed in order to support these organizations going forward is going to be quite large. And I think that we're going to want to take into account the fact that each time we ask a small business to spend a little bit of extra time on climate change initiatives, we're taking away from their opportunity to potentially earn revenues in that particular period of time. Again, we're just recognizing these trade-offs that we're.
No, I think that's a very valid point that you're making, that a lot of the resources, knowledge and networks are and like the access and participation to them are not necessarily for like the small business owners and the SMEs who tend to be the change makers and they tend to be the innovators, but it's again these big conglomerates or corporations that tend to have access to these advanced technologies. So I think it's great that Eco-Canada is almost bolstering the people, like I guess in the middle that don't necessarily have access, to advocate for themselves. I like how you're ending off on the note of being open to exploring the possibilities, which I think is why I kind of started this podcast as well. So thank you again for participating in Sustainable You. Thank you again, Geni.
Thanks so much for tuning in to yet another eye-opening episode of Sustainable You. Again, this is an extraordinary and engaging info series whose purpose is to make sustainable development and sustainability accessible to the average person in their quest to quench their knowledge on environmentalism. Be sure to leave your feedback by liking this week's released edition and by subscribing to this podcast. Again, any love from our followers is much appreciated. Signing off until next time.